Good morning, everyone. I'm John Squires from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, America's Innovation Agency. And we're joining you live from the granddaddy of them all, the 2026 NFL Draft from Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, my opening sentence just now is replete with trademark phrases, which are brand signatures of authenticity, a word or a phrase or a logo that tells you or is designed to tell you what's what. And for those of you of a certain age, you'll recognize the signature phrase, the granddaddy of them all, which is written into football history, of course, by the indomitable and amazing one and only Keith Jackson. But what else? Well, the Rose Bowl, of course, is in beautiful Pasadena, California, where it's enshrined forever in writing across the top of the stadium. Tell me you're not there right now, picturing a sunny day broadcast and all the anticipation and tingles of kickoff. You see, his signature phrase is the Rose Bowl's trademark, a powerful and indelible badge of origin that's transcendent, it's transporting, and a right now signal of authenticity. So it feels just a bit off when I say it in connection with something that isn't the Rose Bowl, that isn't Pasadena, but conveys perfectly my message that this is a big, big deal. And boy, is it. By the numbers, each year over 600,000 fans travel to the NFL Draft, and millions of viewers watch from their living rooms. The energy, the excitement, the renewal, the promise that each selection of a talented athlete brings to your hometown team. By the numbers, the NFL Draft generates upwards of $180 million for your city and the local economy. And of course, hearing your name called and hugging Commissioner Goodell changes the lives and is the first embrace of professional sports for college football players across the country. And as a proud alum of one of Pittsburgh's great universities, the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, home to our beloved Pitt Panthers, hail Pitt, one of the top universities for inventions, I might add, with 107 patents issued just last year. If you couldn't tell, I couldn't be more excited. And what a town, what a place to have this year's draft with Steel City, Three Rivers, and the Golden Triangle. Furthermore, your hometown, the Stillers, I know I'm an adopted son, have a long history, amazing history with trademarks, and of course, the indelible and proud connection to Pittsburgh's steel industry. You see, the Steelers name, the symbol and tradition is a living tribute to the history of steel industry, which built this city, which built this country, which builds winners. The three colored shapes on the Steelers' one-sided logo helmet, the hypocloids, feature three colored shapes called yellow, red, and blue. Each color represents a material used in steel. Yellow, coal; red, iron ore; blue, steel scrap. Originally, the steel mark symbol simply had the word steel, and the rest is history, as they say, because when the Steelers adopted it in 1962, they modified it to read Steelers. And the coolest thing of all, as you know, it's only on one side of the helmet. You see, that started as a test in 1962 due to uncertainty about how the logo may affix to the helmet, but the design became iconic. Things have a way of doing that, especially when you win championships. So they kept it. There you go. And of course, US Steel had a role in it all. The Steelers received permission to use the Steelers steel mark from US Steel, which was a major member of the AISI and deeply tied to the city's identity. US Steel, of course, was founded in 1901 and became one of the most influential corporations in industrial history. Created by financier J.P. Morgan, combined companies by Andrew Carnegie, Carnegie Steel. US Steel was the first corporation in the world valued at over $1 billion. And steel built America with railroads, skyscrapers, bridges, military production, especially during World Wars I and II. Pittsburgh became known as the Steel City precisely because of companies like US Steel, which is why the Steelers name itself reflects the steel industry's roots. The logo is literally an industrial symbol from the steel world. US Steel helped popularize and authorize a symbol that became one of the most iconic and recognizable logos in all of sports. It's a direct tribute to Pittsburgh's industrial heritage with US Steel and the broader American steel industry at its core, and the mark of champions. And today, Steel City, Pittsburgh continues to lead in what my amazing boss, Secretary Lutnick, calls and energetically describes as the American manufacturing renaissance. And of course, we can't talk Steelers without talking about the terrible towel favorite son and Steeler fanatic Myron Cope trademarked the terrible towel and transformed Steeler Nation in 1975. Cope's plea to wave the gold towel at the first playoff game evolved into a symbol that includes the terrible towel twirl. So where better to host the special USPTO Hour celebrating World IP Day in Pittsburgh than the NFL Draft. And this year's World IP Day theme is, you guessed it, IP in sports, ready, set, innovate. As a former Division I football player, and for those of you who know me, I came to play on the scout. I come to the NFL Draft willing to be on the scout team for any of the franchises. I was a member of the famed linebacking squad of the Bucknell Bison, where we were mobile, agile, and hostile. Mobile, agile, and hostile. There's a trademark for you. But maybe not so much because I'm still waiting for the call to come from the commissioner. So, oh well, to this year's draft class, well before name, image, and likeness or NIL meant anything other than zero, this venue has strong significance, which is why I'm excited to lead today's USPTO Hour. For all of those new to our regular webinar series, this USPTO Hour is a discussion of forum directed to a broad range of intellectual property topics, all at the intersection of the agency's mission and work. Just a bit about our team. America's Innovation Agency deals in patents with America's Invention Agency, and we deal in trademarks with America's Branding Agency, and we're just about 14,000 strong with our amazing examiners and attorneys, the best in the world at what they do in all 50 states and US territories. So today we're focused on trademarks, our America's Branding Agency topic, and it's a fascinating issue because the shifting sands in the world of name, image, and likeness, and specifically how college athletes, sports figures, entertainers, stars, influencers, and others are using intellectual property to protect their publicity rights, their internet presence, their name, image, and likeness. And the rest, just when you thought you could see the whole field, and add in a tidal wave of AI, and those of you who have heard me speak on AI know how I explain it. AI, if you'll allow me just the other football for a second, is the Roy Kent of breakthrough technologies. It's here, it's there, it's every you know what where. So this topic is of first team order now more than ever as AI expands and the threat of AI impersonation in cyberspace becomes more and more prevalent. Rest assured, we're here to help, and we're here to meet the moment to help you protect yourself and your name, image, likeness, and brand. We're here with you in the eye of the AI blitz that shows no sign of letting up. So what better time than the doorstep of the NFL Draft? Shift back to today. NIL is bringing an abstract doctrine to the heart of college sports. The market for college athletes of NIL has grown rapidly into the billions. Collectives and schools are now routinely signing athletes to contracts that we'll talk about that slice and dice their package and identity rights, including what they can do with their name, photo, and social media presence. And so what's at stake? The questions are causing a reset about how we think about and use intellectual property. For example, how does one, and moreover, who can protect their name, image, and likeness? In what context? How can we at America's Branding Agency help you do so? Well, thankfully, suiting up and taking the field with us today is a phenomenal panel of experts on the topic. To my left is Jack Wallace, three-time Paralympian gold medalist in sled hockey. And in homage to the draft, Jack, you were hereby drafted to the panel. Reggie Calhoun, the Colorado Buffaloes and football director of NIL and revenue sharing founder, managing director of ProStat Innovations. Welcome, Reggie. Chelsea Miko, corporate consultant, NIL advocate, and founder of Miko Brands. And Professor John Duffy, professor at the University of Virginia School of Law and member of the USPTO's Public Advisory Committee. So thank you to our panel for joining us. For those at USPTO headquarters, we're glad you're at a watch party with your colleagues. A big thanks to our sponsors and everybody who put this amazing event on. You all are the best in the world at what you do. And everyone for joining us. Today's your chance. I encourage you to get in the game, bring your knowledge of name, image, and likeness. Welcome, everyone. Game on. All right, Jack, I think we'll start with you. And maybe just tell us a bit about how you your Team USA journey and how you came to be an American hero, and we're so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've always been an athlete my whole life. I grew up playing football, hockey, baseball, wrestling, you name it, I played it. But then hockey was always my favorite. And, in the driveway with my older brother, the dream was always to go to the NHL, play for the New Jersey Devils. But then when I was 10 years old, I ended up losing my right leg in a boating accident. So for a short period, I thought sports had kind of been taken away from me until I found out about the Paralympics and adaptive sports, and specifically sled hockey. And I got to get back on the ice and play my favorite sport again in just a slightly different way. And those dreams of going to the NHL, just kind of shifted from going and winning Stanley Cups in the NHL to going and making Team USA and winning gold medals. So that became my dream. That became my journey. And I worked for a long time to get there, and just got back home from my third Paralympic Games, and seeing the Paralympic movement grow has been truly amazing.
Oh, it's congratulations! America held their breath and exploded. Where you had a hat trick in the gold medal game. It was a trifecta for Team USA hockey, which was amazing, historic. I think the 5th gold medal for Team USA.
5th in a row.
Yeah, 5th in a row is amazing. And you also mentioned the Devils. Longtime Devils fan, as you know. You recently had a Jack attack where you met Jack Hughes.
Yeah, it was great. I've been involved with the Devils ever since my first Paralympics. The NHL had a movement. Hockey is for everyone. So the NHL got really involved in different versions of adaptive hockey, one of them being included in sled hockey. Pittsburgh has a fantastic sled program. They've been huge supporters of sled hockey and adaptive hockey through all the ranks, youth and all the way up to adult competitive. And they've even had players on the national team. But yeah, so the Devils have been a great partner, and they helped me celebrate. They've obviously done a great job helping Jack Hughes celebrate, who scored the golden goal for the men's team. They also honored Megan Keller, who scored the golden goal for the women's team. So yeah, it was really cool. And as a lifelong Devils fan, getting to drop the puck for them was pretty special.
That's amazing. Yeah, and they've come a long way since the so-called Mickey Mouse days, franchise days. Well, tell us what's next for you. You're on a quest to be a dual sport Paralympian, I understand, for both the summer and winter games?
Yeah, I made a big push to try and qualify for the 2024 Paris Summer Games in the sport of sprint kayak, paracanoe. And fell just short. Racing sports is very different than hockey. Hockey's a game of mistakes, whereas similar to like track and field and swimming, sprint kayaking is you need to be perfect and you need to get every millisecond. And I missed out on Paris by 0.008 of a second. So over the next 2 years, I'll be pushing to hopefully qualify for the LA 2028 Games, which is even more special to be able to play at a Paralympics for Team USA in the United States of America. That hasn't been an opportunity for a lot of athletes, and most athletes who compete for Team USA will never get that opportunity. So it's definitely going to be a worthwhile to put that time and work in to try and make that possible.
Amazing. We'll be there. We'll be there cheering you on, no doubt. Well, Reggie, welcome. Great to have you here. You've got a lot of experience in the NIL world, dating back to when NIL, I guess, first emerged as an economic force. Can you tell us who actually benefits the most from and least from this new era of NIL recognition? But before I get there, let me just a little bit about your background.
Right. So my background is pretty standard. So former athlete, high school athlete, 4 high schools, 4 years, 4 different states. So I was always done a new guy, right? So I always thought about what's next. Joined the military, did that, and then I played a low-level Division III ball. And all of my teammates, we all worked. So we all were athletes and we all had jobs, right? So when I started graduating into the ranks of becoming all conference and leading my team, we were always trying to go to the pros. But you have D1, you got D2, you got D3s, right? So we didn't know what was next after football ended for most of us. So you want to know what's next even after you finish playing ball. So I started a program around 2015. Where we were helping high school athletes go from high school to college, getting their profile together, how to build their name, their resume, their brand, And then in 2021, this thing became a big name, right? NIL. So that to me was simply just, who are you outside of the sport? And that's what we anchored in. It was more so looking at, how do you teach an athlete to think of themselves outside of the sport, outside of the number, outside of the team? Who are you? And then the economic piece became greater, but essentially at the core, it was, how do you get an athlete to see themselves outside of sports? Because when I got injured, it was one of those things like, okay, what if I never play sports ever again, right? And then the pandemic happened, and everybody has a moment in sports, I believe, that you will always say, what happens if this never happens again? So who are you?
So personal brand is a real thing.
It's personal.
Yeah. Wow. And it takes all the work and effort to develop that along, just as you would train, I would imagine.
100%.
Yeah. What are the most important elements for athletes and other creatives to consider when deciding, first, whether to register for their NIL, and second, maybe whether to license it?
Right.
What
So
are the factors?
You have to understand, are you just an athlete, or are you trying to be a professional in athletics, right? So
Right.
as a professional, you have to look at, what's your structure? Are you just a name, or are you just a player? And I believe that they should start to establish themselves as a structural component within this space. Everybody knows that sports is business. Everyone knows that sports is political. So why not start to align yourself with the economics and the politics of what this game is?
Yeah.
Right. So to trademark your name is simply starting at, what do I want to be in this game? Do I just want to be a player? If that's all you want to do is just be a player, fine. But somebody's going to monetize off of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be thinking, how do I get a piece of what I'm contributing to, not as a handout or a entitlement, but I'm taking part of this economic infrastructure.
Interesting. And do athletes, and young aspiring athletes and entrepreneurs have trouble? Is it difficult to have that separate mindset, to think of yourself as yourself outside of the game, and the game yourself within the game?
Right. Yeah, it's very hard, because when you're an athlete, you always are told to focus on, right now, be where your feet are, keep the main thing the main thing. So you're hearing these things that are indoctrinating you into the sport, but keeping the main thing is, what happens when sport ends? Like, there's no plan B. It's the life plan continues. So when sports ends, whether it's 20 years or 40 years, it's going to end one day. How do you transition?
And that's amazing, because even the best athletes in the universe, what's it saying? Father Time is undefeated. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Chelsea, welcome. Lovely to have a fellow Bucknell Bison on the panel.
Feel the same way.
Yep. Please tell us about your background and self.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the USPTO for talking about this topic. It is really important. I've gotten a crash course in it over the past few weeks, and I am a former Division I athlete.
You were a power forward, right?
I was a power forward at Bucknell University. I scored the first points in Soika Pavilion. I don't know if you know that fun fact.
I did not know that. That's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep. And I have been a corporate consultant for my career. So I've always been involved in sports. I am a basketball coach at an all-girls school, which is interesting and relevant. We're at the draft, and everyone loves football. I love football. Everyone does. But part of my interest is, what opportunities for women are there, and some questions around building brands for younger elite athletes, and looking at that along the way instead of looking at it before it's too late.
Well, the WNBA just had their draft a couple weeks ago, and just the energy around that, it was amazing. It was really just breathtaking to watch. It really seems like the league's coming into their own.
It was,
Yeah.
and the level of women's basketball is so much more elevated than when I played. So those athletes are amazing. I'm a mom of 3 kids who are great athletes and have attracted some brand attention. And my husband and I are having those discussions much earlier than I expected. So thank you for having me. And thank you to the great city of Pittsburgh for hosting this. I'm Western Pennsylvania, born and raised, and Western Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh has produced some incredible athletes and just hardworking athletes, good people. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. And I think there's no mistake about the work ethic of Steeltown and the fact that so many athletes are produced out of here. It's just amazing. Well, Professor Duffy, welcome. This is our second NIL broadcast. We'll have to do one more for the hat trick. But so tell us, what's the law out here? What does NIL mean? What does trademark mean? What does personal branding mean from a level according to the law, but also according to commerce?
Well, I think the most important thing about this topic is that the law is changing and developing right before our eyes. So you have to keep watching it and watching it grow. And I think if you went back 20 years or so, people would not even necessarily know what NIL is, or they wouldn't use that term. They'd call it publicity rights. And many people still use that term. And those are state rights that are protected under states to varying degrees. So they vary with,
for example, 50 different set of rights depending on the state?
I think that's right, that the rights fundamentally are state rights. There's no federal legislation that makes it uniform across the country, across this country. And of course, then there's the international dimension that other countries have different rights. So they've traditionally been known as publicity rights, but I think the term name, image, and likeness is, I think, the more modern term, because publicity rights sounds like, well, the rich and famous get those rights, who have publicity agents, but it's not for, somebody who's a young child who's becoming a great athlete. That's not what you'd think. But I think each of us knows that we have our name, we have our image, we have our likenesses, and people want that protected. So increasingly, both in this country and in foreign countries, you're seeing a drive to protecting it on a broad basis for everybody. And I think the drivers in this country, obviously college sports has now moved to allow athletes to make money off their name, image, and likeness. That is obviously a huge engine of changing the law. And by the way, just to point out my university, I have a Virginia pin on, and I have the colors of the University of Virginia in my tie. So I am literally flying a brand of my employer, and a great ACC school. But I should say, so beyond college, there's, I think, two other drivers going on, and those are much more about the entire world. First is the rise of social media, especially the video aspect of social media, that people are doing short videos on TikTok or other platforms, and they are appearing as themselves, and they're beginning to think, I want to appear as myself, and I don't want somebody else to counterfeit that, to sort of have my likeness in a situation that I didn't authorize, maybe I don't agree with what's being done there. And AI is the other factor, which is able to duplicate people in very realistic videos. It used to be, for almost the entire history of video, that if you saw a video, you could say, well, that actually happened. You cannot say that anymore. You cannot say, oh, that person did X because I saw the video of them doing it. You cannot trust your eyes anymore on that because AI can duplicate that. And I think that's leading the push in this and other countries to lock down rights, I think, for everybody. Denmark is right now thinking about giving a copyright to everybody in their name, image, and likeness. I think that may not be the right sort of legal platform. I think trademark is closer to sort of protecting a name. Many people, as already mentioned on this panel, protect their names.
Why would that be? Why is trademark closer, do you think?
Well, I think that if you look at the history of trademark started out very much like name, image, and likeness, which is that it was not viewed as an asset. It was something the government forced you to do, forced you to put your trademark on your product so they could come and find you if you had a defective product.
Now,
And
I think that was the British government, right?
the British government, yeah, the British government, which likes to, but from that has emerged this enormous engine of value. The companies began to think this is valuable, and of course, that's true right now. We all have documents. Almost everybody has a document on them that has their name, image, and likeness. It's a passport or a driver's license, and you're required by the government to have that in many instances. I flew here. I had to have one of those documents in order to get into the airport. But now people are looking at that and saying, that is an asset. Maybe that is something that I should own. And it could be valuable to me. And people are already trademarking their names, to mention just one, Tim Tebow. Other entertainers have for a long time trademarked their name or their stage name, like Cher. So I think, but ordinary people are beginning to think of trademarking things, or even we found just recently, under your leadership, the USPTO issued a trademark to Matthew McConaughey about a sort of motions that he had that was uniquely associated with him. So that prevents AI and other videos from mimicking that, or at least it I think quite likely does. The whole thing is, as we said here, people are out to protect their brand, and they're beginning to think of their brand as themselves. And more people, especially young people, are saying, I have a personal brand and I want protection for that. So that's what we're talking about here in Pittsburgh.
Amazing. And in fact, I saw a clip of Matthew McConaughey talking about his trademark registration, and he said on the clip, trademark yourself. And that's in fact what's going on here, isn't it?
Maybe you should hire him as your spokesman.
That'd be all right.
Yeah, apparently.
I may have just infringed his mark there. I'm sorry.
You're the government. This is not commerce, I
Okay.
think, arguably.
Fair enough. Thank you. You heard from my lawyer. Reggie, what's the business of NIL like day in, day out, especially when you're, Colorado Buffaloes and Coach Prime, and it's just, it seems to just have this energy around what you're doing, and here's young athletes coming into this amazing environment.
Yeah. So I guess the business is really multi-layered. There's so many things happening, right? Even if you're talking about from just getting noticed as an athlete. A lot of platforms monetized off of the talents of an athlete by giving them rankings, giving them brands like, oh, you're a 4-star, you're a 5-star, right? And then those athletes use those stars and rankings in their negotiations, right? But then you say, well, those rankings and those stars got you to the table. Now, what are we transacting? And
So
that's
it's like
where it changes.
A personal credit score for their athleticism.
Yeah. You show up, I'm a 3-star, 4-star,
Yeah.
5-star. Okay, what is that worth? But then you're saying, what are we receiving?
Yeah.
And then when you mix in the NIL with the rev share, and it's kind of one of those things where, who are you? Not a 5-star. Who are you, and what are we receiving? How can we monetize that? But then, what are we sharing from a revenue aspect of it, and what's that value? Right. So I think we're here with the draft, right? Everybody get drafted. I'm a 1st-round draft pick. I'm a 2nd-round draft pick. But then what are we expecting you to do from that position, from that rank?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the confusion happens, is that people assume I'm a 5-star. I should get what the headlines say, right? You were a All-American in college, but you got drafted in the 6th round. The 6th round tells you what you're going to be value at, right? So it's one of those things where the business of it is always moving, it's forever flowing, and just like he mentioned earlier, the laws change so many times, and you have athletes going from state to state, so they're coming from one state to a different state and then transferring to a different state. So those rules change. Every school is in a different state. It's different conference rules, it's different school rules, different team rules. So there's so many things that's happening in one day, and then everybody who's on the outside, from an agent, financial advisor, brand manager, parent, the whole nine.
That's amazing. Well, and then with the athletes coming in and their ratings or rankings, then you have beautiful surprises like Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy. Last person in the draft, and I think Mr. Irrelevant is now a trademark. because of just the amazing achievements and sports prowess he's exhibited once he got on, once he put the laced up.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can think about that. Like an athlete can show up to a program, maybe a lower division program, hit it big and go viral on social. Now he's put on the grand stage of this athlete was probably under recruited. Now everybody wants him because of what happened on the internet. Yeah. He was already talented. The internet exposed it. Now what is that worth? And that's where the conversation and disconnect is always at. Is like, what is that actually worth? But if you don't have a framework of what you're paying for, like a trademark, what's the asset? What are we buying? Then you're going to always have that disconnect on the business side.
Interesting. Well, Chelsea, we're talking a little bit about young athletes. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges to parents in your situation, namely whether deciding whether and what extent to seek NIL protection or personal branding, for kids or parents thinking out there?
Absolutely. Excellent points made on this panel. It is evolving in real time, and that's one of the biggest challenges and opportunities, realizing that regulations may change and rules can change. Okay, I might trademark this. Well, it's not that good, but so 3 things. You know a guy. 3 things related, from my opinion, what parents should be thinking about or the concerns. One is there's no playbook. There is not a playbook for this. I had the opportunity to talk with Reggie last night, and he was sharing how he's writing contracts in real time, making rules for his university in real time, and seeing what works and what doesn't. So there's not a playbook for Reggie. There's not a playbook for, Jack, any of us. So one, there's no playbook. So as a parent or a young athlete, who can you talk to get information? That's why this panel is great. These discussions are excellent. And who can I trust? Okay, playbook. There's the give and the take. Number 2, the give and the take, in my opinion, is I have a young athlete that gets an amazing deal. My son wants to go play football for Reggie and his athletic department. So my son has a lot to gain, but what is he going to give up to play for them? And that's where the lawyers are really important to understand the contracts and what the language states, and make sure that it's not a moving target. So the give and the take. So as a parent, what am I going to give up, or what is my kid going to give up to gain these opportunities? And just focusing on what are the values of your family. That's what we focus on a lot. And does this step or does this opportunity align with our values? The third thing, playbook, give and take, and then timing. So is this worthy of trademarking? Timing means I have younger kids, but we need to start talking about it now. Do we need to brand all of them right now? Probably not. Or trademark them now? Probably not. But the timing aspect is a really important consideration.
So it's part of their journey from very early days.
I think so.
Yeah, interesting.
As a mom who's kept our kids off the internet and really tried to raise them conservatively and off of social media, as I said to Professor earlier, they're already on the internet because their volleyball teammates post them, or they're there whether I want them to be or not. So,
interesting. So Jack, what's your particular experience, if you've had with NIL issues, and is there any with sled hockey? I imagine it's a little bit different dynamic because there's not a professional sports league with that, but there's of course Team USA and playing for your country, and you compete in cups and of course the Olympics. But how is that experience? How's the experience with NIL and your personal brand come about with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot more restrictions when it comes to the Olympics and Paralympics about the timing of when you're allowed to do brand partnerships, which brands you can do partnerships with, because these brands pay a lot to be the one brand that is associated with Team USA or the Olympics, Paralympics, where you do have, like in the NFL, you do have NFL brands, but then you see a lot of players going to get their own personal deals with smaller brands or just different brands, and they kind of work their way around that with different logos, different timing, where they're not allowed to say certain things. So that was definitely a hurdle to get around. But also before the Paris Games, I kind of saw how big and how much attention was really coming to the Paralympics. So I took some time with my manager and agent and actually created a logo and a website and all that stuff, to where it just adds a little more value from your end as an athlete, where it's you can say, hey, look at what I'm doing on the ice, look at my performance, but at the same time look at the time and dedication that I'm putting into my own brand. And that's the value that I add, where I can be an amazing athlete, but I might just fly off the rails because you don't know what I'm doing behind the scenes, and that could be a detriment to your brand. So the brands can be more careful. These companies can be more careful with who they sign, to where you're putting in this time and effort outside of your sport. Where you always want to focus on your craft and you always want to focus on your performance. But it definitely adds value from your end, to where you can offer a little bit more. You can offer a little bit more safety and security, and promote yourself a little bit as well.
Amazing. As a gold medal Olympian, did you ever think that these are the type of things you'd have to think about or consider?
No, definitely not. I first made the team my freshman year of college, and we weren't getting paid or anything like that. So it was really just a passion thing. Yeah. So I figured I still had to have jobs in the summer when I wasn't in classes, and I worked for my dad's firewood business, as you're one of our customers for a couple summers.
Absolutely.
But yeah, to see how the Paralympic movement has grown, and just the Paralympics as a brand themselves, where I think my first time around, every once in a while you get a funny story, you get all this merch, right? You get all the Team USA swag when you first get to the games, kind of like on when you first get to an NFL team, you get decked out in all their gear. But every once in a while,
or USPTO account.
Or yeah, exactly right. Thank you. And every once in a while, some merch with the rings instead of the Agitos, the Paralympic symbol of the Agitos instead of the Olympic rings. And every once in a while, it's all a bunch of Team USA stuff. It's all getting shipped to a different country, so it get mixed up. And in 2018, it was, if you got something with the rings on it, it was really cool. You're like, oh, I got an Olympic thing. Like, oh, this is really cool. But now you see the complete opposite, where if you get something with the rings on it, you go and exchange it, because you're like, no, I want something with the Paralympics on it, because that's what I'm competing in. That's who I am. I'm a Paralympian, not an Olympian. Yeah. So it's been amazing to see the Paralympic movement grow from when I first made the national and Paralympic team. And yeah, no, the opportunities now are growing every single day, and I was lucky to take advantage of a few of them and get some partnerships going into the Milan games. So no, I never thought that was going to be a thing. I thought I was going to have to work my way through my whole career.
Amazing, but look at the brand value and then the sort of the flipping the script, as 100%, it were.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Well, speaking of scripts, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about contracts and signing athletes to contracts, NIL, and certainly, as they go to professional sports leagues. Aren't contracts creatures of state law?
They are very much creatures of state law, but of course they can be, they can involve federal rights. So obviously patents and trademarks can be licensed, and the underlying right is a federal right, but the contract is a state right. I think the underlying rights for basic name, image, and likeness are state rights, but the contracts, but even if somebody trademarks them, which would give them a federal right, which may be stronger and will be have some nationwide protection, the rights that are, the underlying contract rights are state law. But I think it's interesting to think about something Chelsea said, which is you have to be careful about thinking about what you're giving up. Because rights are powerful, and if you do sign a contract to alienate them, that's legal speak for give them away for some sort of value, that is binding. And I think that's an interesting thing for something that happened this January, which is that the quarterback for Duke University in the 2025-26 season decided to transfer after the season. And he had signed a contract with Duke University for 2 years, and his university sued him over breach of contract because he was attempting to move to another university. The athlete is Darian Mensah. He is a terrific athlete. Everybody at University of Virginia knows that because in the ACC championship game, he had an absolutely spectacular game, which unfortunately meant UVA lost to Duke. It pains me to say that, but that's almost like a highlight film for how good he is. He decided to transfer to Miami, and it was interesting to read the litigation. It's all state law. It was litigated in the North Carolina courts. The litigation lasted less than 10 days. It was from filing to complaint to settlement because the timing of the the transfer portal process was so quick. They absolutely had to have a settlement, and they did reach a settlement. It's a confidential settlement, but it's rumored to be that there was substantial payments from Mensah and probably his new school to Duke University for breaching the contract that he had. And I think Duke was trying to be fair, but they wanted both to be fair to their athletes, but also to say our contracts are binding. If you are going to come here and sign for 2 years, you should take that seriously. And I think that goes to another aspect of branding, which is building responsibility. By giving people rights, it's often been said trademarks encourage companies to develop a good brand, to invest in it, and to take responsibility that you want a good product out there. And I think personal branding should encourage the same thing, that young people especially should think very carefully about what they're doing, what image they're projecting to the public, and that might encourage responsibility, which I think is a good thing.
Oh, fascinating. Well, Reggie, what are the types of ways that athletes can monetize their NIL away from their contracts with the schools?
Yeah, so it's typical conversations, right? So partnership with a business, a joint venture. They can do some real estate, social media, speaking engagements, autographs, writing, training programs, right? Even if they're just building their own product, right? If they wanted to develop something that they had in their mind, they can sell that, right? So everything's around the same, in the real world, right? Where you can transact from ideas, partnerships, relationships. But you also have to be careful with, are you leveraging the institution's brand to monetize your brand, right? Because that's when the conflict happens as well too. So they can do things outside of the school or outside of that institutional license, but they have to understand what they're actually monetizing, right? So that's what I mentioned earlier about understanding what you're bringing to this economy. Not just, I'm a good football player. Are you a business? Are you a product? Are you a brand? Are you a service? Do you speak? Do you train? Right. Are you teaching? Right. So it's so many things. Are you a silent partner? Are you just using capital to invest? Right. So there are so many ways, but you have to understand what you're trying to do prior to just doing it.
Yeah. So interesting. And maybe tell me a little bit, if you would, about the transfer portal dynamic, especially because that's a unique to college sports attribute.
Yeah, so like Professor mentioned, the transfer portal is one piece. That's the NCAA. You are free to transfer whenever it opens. It's interconnected with the contracts because there are contractual rights that are tied to what you licensed, but you can also transfer whenever you want to. And I think the conversation gets muddied because you're free to transfer wherever you want to go, but you also have an obligation contractually that you were tied to as well. So before you make the decision to transfer, you should also know, what are my consequences? What are the blowbacks from this contract? Not from me transferring as an athlete. What's the blowback from the contract? And I think there's a lot of emotion that goes into it saying that you don't want to let me transfer. You're free to transfer. this contract is stabilizing the relationship from an economic standpoint. So just having them understand, and just for you too, Chelsea, is understanding you're free to do whatever you want to as an athlete. You're contractually obligated as a brand, a business, to fulfill that obligation. So portal is one piece, contracts are a separate piece, and they're not one in the same.
Interesting. Well, Chelsea, the portal has been in the headlines of late with women's basketball and the women's collegiate basketball. I believe it was University of Tennessee that they were left with one team member when all was said and done.
Do they want me to play? I'm ready. No, maybe. Give me a couple of days.
But you can have a week or so to train.
Okay, thanks.
But so you're seeing this, the dynamic about the transfer portal isn't, just for college football. We're really seeing it transcended through the sports world, whichever sport it may be.
And I spoke with Reggie last night, and Reggie, what sports do you focus on at your school, Colorado?
It's football, men's and women's basketball.
Football, men's and women's basketball, I think, is getting the most attention right now. But it is my opinion that there's opportunity, financial and otherwise, in a lot of sports. I mean, look at Jack's story. It's incredible. And not only is Jack a great athlete, but you have a platform. Do you know what I mean? And you are an example to kids who, to use your phrase earlier, they're not willing, they don't want to get in the game, So I think the get in the game phrase is incredible for female athletes, for younger athletes, for any athlete. Get in the game, practice your sport, get out there. And I think I don't even know that there's a limit right now.
Wonderful. Well, Jack, you mentioned in some of the decisions and deals that you've done, you had your manager and your agent. Is it important? It seems, almost intuitive, but given that things get so commercial so early on, is it important to have a business manager or knowledge and train yourself in finance and business dealings?
Yeah, I 100%. Being able to, I think educating yourself in whatever subject you're trying to pursue. I think a big part of my athletic career was diving into, my education as far as how do I increase my performance by training and recovery and all these things that you see all these sports programs all over the world investing millions of dollars into, where, if you don't have that resources, you have to do it yourself, right? So you have to educate yourself. And then the same thing was true when I realized the opportunity that there was to potentially monetize my own success as an athlete. And I wasn't well versed in that, so I had to go out and find someone that was. And it's up to you if you want to be the one that's managing your contracts. If you want to learn state law and teach yourself all about that, go for it. That was not for me, so I decided to get in touch.
An engineer?
I was an engineer. Learned a lot of stuff that I've probably forgotten, and just going. The idea of going back to school and putting my face back in some textbooks was not appealing to me. I decided to go for some outside help and really just learn that way, where they were able to teach me in a much more simpler way. And as far as the contracts and negotiation, I left that largely up to them. Where it's kind of difficult when if you have to represent yourself, to where you see a popular story in the NFL, specifically Lamar Jackson, where he goes and represents himself and kind of have to have these very difficult conversations with the ownership of his team, where basically they have to say bad things about him to his face, where they have to devalue him because it's a negotiation, where and obviously that's his right to do, and I'm sure it's pretty difficult on him and his team, but at the same time it's always going to be your decision, and wherever you see the value in it, I'm sure he's saving God knows how much money by not having representation, but give and take. You have to understand what you're giving up for that. Mm-hmm. And obviously he has to have those difficult conversations with the ownership. So yeah, I went the other route and let some professionals handle those negotiations, the contracts, and make sure I was protected through my contracts. And yeah, that's the route that I went,
Yeah.
and it was very beneficial.
Really interesting observation about Lamar Jackson and dynamic in the negotiation, because that's your give and take as we're talking about. Well, John, for you, if AI starts to encroach and with deep fakes and things of that sort, how does that play out, and what kind of rights can and do you have in trying to thwart some of the takings that are going on there?
Well, there was a new law passed just last year by the Congress. People think that the Congress can't get anything done, but in fact, this was passed nearly unanimously. I think there was just a single-digit number of no votes about trying to have mechanisms that would force people to take down videos that are faked, and particularly videos that are, sort of disreputable in various ways. And that is, I think, it shows there's, I think, a broad consensus across the political spectrum that AI deepfakes and such things should not try to put a person in a situation that they would not be in. I do think that one of the values of a trademark is that a personal trademark is that it would allow you rights under something called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which definitely protects federal intellectual property rights, which clearly includes trademarks, and would allow people to have broader rights to take things down. Whereas if you just rely on state rights, it's questionable about whether whether those rights would be sufficient to get you rights against platforms that are maybe using your image, or usually it's not the platform. The platform is just broadcast or putting the material out on the internet, but it's some other actor, often not a great actor, and you would want to have rights against that, your own personal rights, not just have to wait till some administrator in Washington says we're going to try to force this person to take it down, but instead that you can get an attorney and get some immediate relief. So I think that is important, and I think the discussion here about how because it's a new area of law, we need more education. There was an article just last year about the University of North Carolina was hiring people who are trying to teach all their athletes, not just in the revenue sports, but all their athletes about this new era of name, image, and likeness, because the university wants its athletes to be successful and to think of investing in themselves. And so I thought that was very interesting, and I think athletes want to know more about this field. So the universities should be doing a lot to help them to the extent the universities can understand the changing law.
Well, absolutely, and that's why we're so grateful to the National Football League to be able to have the panel and host this from here, because it is about the education. It is about making sure personal brand is part of your equipment, if you will, going into this. How does one get a trademark, or how does that come about?
Well, it is very important, and as we talk about brands, the audience can't see here, but filled in this room are the logos of. There's all the team helmets on a one wall across from me, and behind us we have the registered trademarks from all the teams. Yep. Copies of them, and they're exemplary. And I noticed behind you there's the Jets. I know you're a Jets fan. I think it's one of the oldest ones
Jets,
up there.
Yes.
The Jets, yes. So it's actually fairly easy, unlike getting a patent, which is actually quite hard. It's, I think, relatively inexpensive, a few $100s for a filing fee, and I think it can be done relatively easy. There are certainly attorneys who specialize in it. But for athletes who are in college, who are often talking about these days millions of dollars, I believe for example, the contract of this one quarterback, Mensa, was definitely in the millions of dollars per year. So if you're talking about that, you should think more carefully about getting legal representation. And in that, once you start thinking about that, the sort of legal representation and getting a lawyer to just read and write the contracts that are being presented, the cost of a trademark is a drop in an ocean, it seems to me. And the office that you head is the place to go to. And it has a very strong web presence. You can go and search trademarks very, very easily to see what's available. And it's, I think, relatively easy to understand the process and not too expensive.
Great. So we'll wrap up. It's been a fascinating discussion, very educational, especially from the personal experiences from everybody in the panel. I so appreciate it. I want to just wrap up with going down the panel. Did you have a favorite sports hero growing up, and if you would tell us who that was and what it meant to you? Chelsea?
Oh, could I go last?
Okay.
Thank you.
Jack?
It was for sure Martin Brodeur on the Devils.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, one of the best
Ever.
in my opinion, the best goalie of all time. When I played stand-up hockey, I played defense and goalie, so I was also a Scott Stevens fan. Of course, a little bit before my time, but just going back and watching old highlights, but watching those two, win championships and just be so dominant in their craft. It's just when you get to watch the best play and also be a fan of them, it's really special.
Yeah, amazing. Reggie?
I think mine is ironic that it was Deion Sanders, right? So first person I seen play football. I didn't really know what was going on. I was like, who's this guy dancing on TV? Right? So it was cool, and that kind of got me into sports. And then, of course, now it's LeBron, right? I mean, LeBron, from high school to now, he's always been a brand. He's always took care of his business, and he always built a team around him that took care of all the things that made his machine work.
Chelsea?
A lot of great NBA athletes, basketball inspiration, but I have to say, when I was an AAU player here, Swing Cash I played in the gym with her, and Tanisha Wright was a teammate of mine, and she's had an incredible career as a player and a coach. So these people that you get to meet in real life, it's amazing. And LeBron, it's a great one. I saw him play in high school, shooting half court shots in the warm-ups.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great.
John?
Well, I must say I was a runner 4 years in college, high school and college as a varsity athlete, and then a semi-pro runner afterwards in distances, marathons and things like that. So I have to say Bill Rogers, especially because he came from nowhere. His first victory in a Boston Marathon, he was kind of an unknown, and I think he wore a T-shirt that was where he wrote on the T-shirt with a pen. And it just was an amazing thing that he did to sort of get to this incredible level. And he also actually created a brand. Then he created a clothing line with his own name and an image too. So I think that it would probably be Bill Rogers because I think he's a great athlete.
Fantastic. Well, I'm gonna go last, and mine is Joe Namath, of course, surprise, the New York Jets, but and of course, from quarterback central in Western Pennsylvania, amazing athlete. But Namath was so good coming out of Alabama. He went to the AFL, not the AFC. It was the AFL. There were two different leagues, and his performance and his personal brand is legendary. And he was so good that he, I think, crystallizes the merging of the leagues. And now we have our NFC favorites, our AFC favorites. So shout out to Joe Willie. So thank you very much. Amazing panel, amazing participation. We at America's Branding Agency are grateful to have you. And we hope we've shed some light on a really evolving, elusive, and time-sensitive issue that we all have whether we're athletes or personal brands, affecting social media, affecting our online presence, and we're here to help. So come see us at the office, come see us online. Thank you very much.